You know what happened to me yesterday? I walked out of the grocery store, looked at my receipt, and I actually stopped walking. I froze in the parking lot. I looked at the bag in my hand, singular bag, and then I looked at the receipt again. $78 for this. And then I get in my car, turn on the radio, and I hear some suit from the Federal Reserve telling me that inflation is cooling, that we've conquered the beast, that inflation is down to 3%. And I'm sitting there looking at my $78 bag of breakfast thinking, am I taking crazy pills? Because if inflation is 3%, why does my car insurance cost 40% more than it did 2 years ago? Why is my rent up 20%? Why does a cheap night out now cost $100? Look, if you feel like you're making decent money on paper, but you're statistically poorer than you were 3 years ago, you aren't crazy. You're being gaslit. My name is Marco, and I spend way too much time thinking about the hidden mechanics of the financial system so you don't have to. If you're someone who feels like no matter how hard you work or how many raises you get, the goalpost keeps moving further away, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Today, we are going to do something the government hates. We are going to calculate your real inflation rate, not the watered-down massaged number they show on the news. We're going to look at why, for the average middle-class earner, your personal inflation rate is likely closer to 18%. And look, I'm going to show you the math. I'm going to show you exactly how they change the formulas to make the numbers look better, and more importantly, what you need to do with your money right now to stop bleeding purchasing power. Here's the thing. To understand why you feel broke, you have to understand the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. This is the holy grail number the Fed uses to decide if they're going to raise or lower interest rates. Theoretically, the CPI is a basket of goods. Imagine a giant, imaginary shopping cart that represents what the average American buys. Milk, gas, rent, a new TV, a haircut. They track the price of this basket year over year. Simple, right? Well, here's what most people don't realize. The government has a vested interest in keeping that number low. Why? Because Social Security payments, government pensions, and billions of dollars in Treasury bonds are linked to inflation. If they admit inflation is 15%, the government goes broke paying out benefits. So, over the last 40 years, they have quietly tweaked the formula. They've changed the math to make the report card look better. Let me give you a specific example. It's called Substitution Bias. Back in the day, the CP, I assumed you bought the same stuff. If steak went from $10 to $20, inflation was 100%. Makes sense, but now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics argues that you, the consumer, are smart. If steak gets too expensive, you won't buy it. You'll switch to hamburger. So, even though steak doubled in price, the CPI model swaps it out for the cheaper hamburger and says, see, your food costs didn't go up that much. They call this consumer choice. I call it a lower standard of living. Look, if you have to downgrade from steak to hamburger, and then from hamburger to soy paste just to keep your bill the same, that isn't stable prices. That is a collapse in your quality of life. But the CPI counts that as a win. Now, let's talk about the stuff you actually have to pay for, because this is where the 3% number falls apart completely. The official inflation rate is heavily weighted by things that are cheap, like electronics. Yes, TVs are cheaper than they were 10 years ago, but you can't live inside a 65-inch 4K TV. Let's look at the big three expenses that destroy your wealth and how they're actually moving. Number 1. Housing. The government calculates housing inflation using something called owner's equivalent rent. They literally call homeowners and ask, hey, if you were to rent your house out, how much do you think you'd get? It's a guess. It's a survey. Meanwhile, in the real world, look at the Case-Shiller Home Price Index. Look at mortgage rates. If you wanted to buy a median home in 2020 with a 3% mortgage, your payment was maybe $1,800. Today, same house. Price is up 40%. Interest rate is 7%. That payment is now $3,400. That is nearly a 100% increase in the cost of shelter for a new buyer. But does the CPI show 100% inflation? No. It shows a gentle 5 or 6% rise in shelter costs. Number 2. Insurance. This is the silent killer. Raise your hand in the comments if your car insurance renewed recently and you nearly had a heart attack. Auto insurance is up 22% year over year in some states. Homeowners insurance in places like Florida or California, up 40%, 50%, sometimes 100%. Insurance is a mandatory cost. You cannot legally drive without it. You cannot have a mortgage without it, yet it's a tiny sliver of the CPI weighting. Number 3. Services and labor. You go to get your oil changed. You go to the dentist. You hire a plumber. The parts might be the same price, but the labor is up massively. Why? Because the plumber needs to pay for his expensive groceries and his expensive rent. This is the wage price spiral the Fed is terrified of. And it's here. So, where do I get this 18% number? Am I just making it up? No, there are economists who track inflation using the original methodologies, the way the US government used to calculate it in 1980 or 1990, before they introduced all these hedonic adjustments and substitutions. If you look at charts from groups like Shadow Government Stats using the 1980 base metric, inflation isn't 3%. It's been hovering between 8% and 12% for years, and spiked closer to 18% during the peak of the recent crisis. Look at this chart. The gap between the red line, reality, and the blue line, official story, represents your disappearing middle-class life. This explains the disconnect. This explains why you make $100,000 a year, but you feel like you're making $50,000. Because in terms of purchasing power, you are. This is where it gets really interesting. And by interesting, I mean terrifying. There is a psychological concept called the money illusion. It's the tendency for people to think of currency in nominal terms, dollar amounts, rather than real terms. Purchasing power. Your boss gives you a 4% raise. You think, great, I made more money. But if your personal inflation rate, your rent, your food, your insurance, went up 18%, you just took a 14% pay cut. You are working harder, producing more value, and taking home less wealth. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Marco, but gas prices are down. Eggs did come down a little bit from that crazy peak. And you're right, we are seeing disinflation. But please, for the love of your wallet, do not confuse disinflation with deflation. Disinflation means prices are still going up, just slower than before. Deflation means prices are actually going back to 2019 levels. Let me tell you right now, prices are never going back to 2019 levels. The system is designed to inflate. The US debt is $34 trillion. If deflation happens, the government can't pay its debts. They need inflation to inflate away the debt. They need your dollars to be worth less, so they can pay back what they borrowed with cheaper money. You are the collateral damage in their debt management strategy. Okay, enough doom and gloom. I don't want you to leave this video depressed. I want you to leave this video angry, but productive. If the real inflation rate is 18%, you cannot save your way to wealth in a savings account paying 4 or 5%. You are literally locking in a guaranteed loss of purchasing power. Here is the playbook for surviving a high inflation environment. Step 1. The personal audit. Stop looking at the CPI. Calculate your CPI. Look at your top 3 expenses from 2022 and compare them to today. If your personal inflation is 15%, that is your new hurdle rate. Any investment or raise that returns less than 15% is a loss. Step 2. Own scarcity. In a world where paper money is being printed into oblivion, you need to own things that cannot be printed. This is why the wealthy buy real estate. This is why they buy stocks. This is why they buy Bitcoin or gold. You don't want to hold the currency. You want to hold the asset that the currency is chasing. Step 3. Aggressive income churning. The days of company loyalty are dead. It's a loyalty tax. Data shows that employees who stay in a job more than 2 years get paid 50% less over their lifetime than those who switch. Why? Because annual raises are usually pegged to that fake 3% inflation number, but the market rate for new hires is pegged to reality. If you haven't changed jobs in 3 years, you are likely underpaid by 20%. Go get your market rate. Step 4. Fix your debt. If you have a 3% mortgage, congratulations. You won the lottery. Never pay that off early. The bank is losing money on you every single day, but if you have credit card debt at 25%, you are drowning. You are paying 25% interest in an 18% inflation world. You are getting crushed from both sides. Attack high interest debt like your life depends on it, because your financial life does. Look, the system is designed to be confusing. It's designed to make you feel like it's your fault, that you can't get ahead. They want you to think you're just bad at budgeting, rather than realizing the currency itself is broken. But once you see the real inflation rate, once you accept that 18% is the hurdle you have to jump, the game clarifies. You stop trying to save pennies and start trying to make dollars. You stop trusting the official narrative and start looking at your own reality. Don't let them gaslight you. Trust your receipt, not the press release. If this video opened your eyes, do me a favor. Share it with a friend who keeps complaining about grocery prices but doesn't understand why. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next deep dive. And I'll see you in the next one.